All right. Hi, everyone. We are live. My name is Katie Kuntz. I'm a social news producer here at CNBC. And today we're joined by CNBC's senior Washington correspondent, Eamon Javers. And we're going to be talking all about the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack. So let's just start with the basics, Eamon. A major oil pipeline was shut down over the weekend after a cyber attack. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, it's Colonial Pipeline, and their pipeline goes up the east coast of the United States. They're based in Georgia. And what happened is they got hit by a ransomware attack, and they decided they needed to take the pipeline offline in order to deal with any potential consequences there, right? So they're saying that for safety and security reasons, they didn't know exactly how far this was going to go. They felt like they needed to just shut the whole thing down. But of course, that can create fuel problems for the east coast of the United States and potentially for the rest of the U.S. economy. So there's a lot of attention on this in terms of what it means for fuel prices, what it means for companies that are trying to do business, and then what this attack says about where we are in this sort of state of this ongoing low-level cyber war that's happening in America right now. American companies are being hit by this ransomware in unprecedented numbers. They're paying out millions and millions of dollars in bounties. Straight from American companies, paying it through Bitcoin or Monero or any other cyber currency that's demanded by the ransomware guys, and they're sending that money directly to criminal gangs. It's something we just haven't seen in American history before. I'm trying to think of a precedent. It's maybe the 1930s when you had this string of bank robbers was the only time where you've seen criminal gangs getting into corporate America's pocketbook the way we're seeing right now. And companies are struggling to deal with it, and they're watching this one for some kind of indication of what the precedent is going to be. Is the government going to come to the rescue? Is the company going to figure out a solution? Are the hackers going to give up? And we just don't know. The story is ongoing. It's unfolding as we speak. The White House is responding. The company is responding. The attackers are responding. And we'll see where this lands.
Yeah, so where do things stand now with the Colonial Pipeline situation and the shutdown?
Well, we've seen statements today from everybody involved, right? I mean, the fascinating thing about this, so ransomware, in a ransomware attack, as your viewers know, what happens is they lock up your systems and they demand that you pay them, or they're not going to unlock your systems, right? So that you have to pay this ransom. The question is whether Colonial Pipeline is going to pay the ransom or not in order to get access to the systems again. We don't know the answer to that. We've had statements today from Colonial Pipeline, from the FBI, from the White House. Even the hackers have a firm, or an entity, not a firm, a hacking entity called DarkSide. They put out a statement today, and none of those entities have told us whether or not Colonial has paid the ransom or is going to pay the ransom or where that stands. So we just don't know as of right now whether they've paid or not. But Colonial says that they are reopening their pipeline on a step-by-step gradual basis, and they think that they could have it up and running by the end of the week. So it's clear that a substantial disruption has happened here. But we just don't know where this thing stands right now and whether they're going to pay the hackers or something else is going to happen to resolve this.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about the hacker group? What do we know about Darkseid?
Yeah, I mean, well, we don't know much. They're relatively new, and the cybersecurity experts that I've been talking to today say that Darkseid is an entity that came on the scenes kind of out of nowhere and was very aggressive right from the jump and very professional right from the jump. They maintain a hotline that you can call. They have, associates who will help you navigate the ransom paying process. They're a very robust organization. They have a weird kind of social conscience, which is fascinating, right? They say that they want to do good for society. They've talked about wanting to make payments for some of the ransoms that they get and send some of that money to charity to sort of burnish their image. It's a weird thing for a criminal gang to be concerned about, doing well for society, but that's at least what they say on the dark web about themselves and their motivations. And then we got this really strange notice today. I mean, this is a group, remember, they've shut down a major supply of fuel in the United States. They're causing millions of dollars of economic damage. And then they put out a statement today in which they seem to express some remorse about all that. Here's what they said. I'll just pull it up for you because we've never seen anything like this. The statement from Darkseid is, "We are apolitical. We do not participate in geopolitics. Do not need to tie us with a defined government or look for our motives. Our goal is to make money and not creating a problem for society." So they feel like maybe this has created a problem for society. And in this part of the statement, they actually promise some reforms to come. They say, from today, we introduce moderation and check each company that our partners want to encrypt to avoid social consequences in the future. So in the future, they say they don't want to do anything this damaging, but that leaves unsaid or unclear what's going to happen with Colonial Pipeline. Are they going to just let them go, or what's happening? I spoke to Lior Div, who is the CEO of a company called CyberReason, which is a cybersecurity company. He's in Tel Aviv today, and I talked to him a short time ago. He said he thinks that what's going on here is there's a dispute inside the hacking group about whether or not this was the right target to hit. And clearly some people feel like it was not the right target, not because it's causing too much damage or because there's too much money at stake, but because it's getting too much attention. And he said that he thinks that there are probably some people on the hacking side of this who feel like, they've bitten off more than they can chew here. They're getting international attention. The White House is involved. The president is talking about it now. And this thing is simply too hot. And that's why they want to back off. But on the other hand, he said they still want the money. So that's what it boils down to, is a question of dollars and cents. And we'll see what happens.
So are there any bigger implications at play here from the shutdown, from the attack?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about today is we saw Ann Neuberger, who's the White House cyber advisor, in the briefing room today. And she was asked specifically what her advice is for companies that are in this boat. Should they pay the ransom? Should they not pay the ransom? What should they do? And her answer was different than what you typically hear from the U.S. government. The U.S. government typically says something like, we understand this is a difficult situation, but our advice is don't pay the hackers. And the reason you don't pay the hackers is because you don't want to make a market for this kind of attack in the future, right? If you pay the hackers, all you're doing is A, encouraging them to do it again because it's profitable, and B, giving them the money to develop the resources to do it again with better computers and a bigger staff. So typically you get the U.S. government saying, never pay, just don't pay these guys, figure a way out of it without paying the bribe. In this case, though, she sort of said, well, we get it. We understand how difficult things are for these companies. And she said the U.S. government is not giving any advice to Colonial Pipeline about whether they should pay or not pay. And that seemed to be a sort of an acknowledgement of reality here, which is that some of these companies feel like they don't have any choice. Their business is going to die if they don't pay. If they can't get operations going again, there's only so long they can go without revenue, without operations, and all the rest. So some of these companies feel that they have to pay. A lot of them are paying. And the big question this week is, will Colonial pay? And then what's the U.S. government going to do about this? Because if this is coming from, former Soviet bloc countries, if this is coming from people who are effectively under the protection of Vladimir Putin or some other entity out there in the world that's hostile to the United States, it makes it very difficult. You can't really pursue that through law enforcement. The FBI could identify who this is. The Department of Justice can issue indictments. None of that is going to matter if the home governments don't agree to extradite those people or don't even acknowledge that it's happening inside their country. So there has to be sort of a diplomatic, solution to this, and some of that requires a forceful response from the United States to get the attention of the people who are doing it. And we just don't know what form that response is going to take. We've seen the U.S. willing to impose sanctions, willing to issue indictments, but none of that seems to be working. So the question is, what's the next tool up the escalation ladder, that doesn't go all the way to the horrific idea of, a drone strike or some kind of military response, which could start a war. You just don't want that.
Yeah, so I want to kind of, going off of that, take a step back and look at the wider context of this attack, because we have been seeing an uptick in ransomware attacks. And can you kind of talk about that context?
Yeah, I mean, it's devastating. Billions of dollars are being paid by American corporations. They're struggling to get their arms around this. The companies are paying mostly in secret. And the frustrating thing for me as a reporter in covering this is that the companies are hiding the ball about how bad the issue is. We know that there are lots of companies that have been impacted by, for example, the SolarWinds hack, which happened earlier this year. And we only see a very small handful of those companies coming out and publicly admitting it. And that's for a number of reasons, right? I mean, companies don't want reputational damage. They don't want to admit to their customers that their data might not be as secure as the customers expect or believe that it is. And they don't want to face lawsuits. They don't want to face class action lawsuits from trial lawyers who say, you know what, it's your fault. my client's data was leaked on the internet, and therefore you have to pay. So if they don't acknowledge it, then they don't have to deal with those repercussions. And if they don't acknowledge it, they don't have to deal with the stock market implications, right? I mean, you could see a situation where a company announces it's been hacked and stock price goes down, and the shareholders lose a lot of money, the management of the company loses a lot of money. They don't want that either. So the response that we've seen from corporate America largely is to hide the ball on it and not to admit the scale of the problem. But that lack of disclosure makes it very difficult for the public to understand this massive campaign that's underway. And there really is a hot cyber war going on right now, and American companies are on the front line. They are the front line of that cyber war, and there's a lot of damage taking place. And companies are in the very uncomfortable position of sending money directly to gangsters, which is not something any law-abiding company wants to be doing.
Yeah, so I think before we wrap up, I'll just toss it back to you if there's anything else you want to add about the situation and what you're looking to see next.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, is Colonial going to pay? Have they already paid? And maybe the payment is why they can start to reopen their systems. But the interesting thing about this, I've talked to some of the people whose job it is to negotiate the ransoms with the hackers, right? The companies call in these expert negotiators who then go onto the dark web and get into chat rooms with the hackers and negotiate the price. Two things that they tell me I think that are fascinating about this. One is that the price is almost always negotiable, right? The hackers ask for a certain amount. The companies always barter on that, and they end up with some lower figure than where they started with the initial demand. So it does serve a company's interest to negotiate on price. The other thing is that when companies pay, the vast majority of occasions, the hackers actually release the data. The hackers actually live up to their end of the deal after they get paid. Because one of the big fears here, if you're a company, is, well, we'll pay these guys millions of dollars in Bitcoin or Monero or something, and they'll just disappear with our money, and we won't get our data back, and then we'll be, victimized twice. But the reality is the hackers almost always give the data back or unlock the systems. And the reason for that is because they're trying to send a signal to the next target that if you pay us, you'll get your data back. They don't want the word out on the street that they're not living up to their end of the deal, or else the next group's not going to be as likely to pay them. So if they want money, they got to release the data. So it's this fascinating haggling, negotiating process, all completely illegal, but happening in a way that we've seen in other contexts negotiations happen. It's a strange underworld, and it's just getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, so I think we'll wrap it up there, but it is a really fascinating story, so we'll be watching. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you to our CNBC Senior Washington Correspondent, Eamon Javers, for joining us today and answering all of our questions. So thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.